The Oracl3 Network.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 16910 means we got shots fired at 4:15 a.m. Route 291. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter
of mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Tonight, Toronto's Greektown, one of Canada's most popular neighborhoods, is shut down.
Apparently, multiple shootings in the area at Danforth.
Police swarming the scene after gunshots ripped through Danforth Avenue.
I heard at least 20 shots. Clip being spent, reloading, clip being spent, reloading, clip being spent. That's what I heard. And then I saw the carnage as I ran down the street.
The gunman, dressed in all black.
The Danforth is a neighborhood in Toronto, Ontario. Both Danforth Avenue and Danforth Roads cross through the neighborhood, which is filled with retail stores and restaurants offering various international foods. Residents and tourists alike were preparing for the upcoming Taste of the Danforth Festival, an annual event attracting 1.6 million people over the brief span of 3 nights and 2 days. The festival was a few weeks away, yet that didn't stop the heavy, bustling traffic that Danforth typically saw. Sunday, July 22, 2018, was not unlike any other summer evening in the neighborhood also known as Greektown because of its sizable Greek population. The evening was a nice, comfortable temperature in the low 70s, and most of the restaurants and shops were still buzzing with activity. The evening that began so relaxing and lovely for many was about to turn into the most terrifying and bloody night that any of them would ever experience. Many people that night came face to face with a madman who had a vendetta. Sadly, the vengeance he sought had nothing to do with the innocent people affected by the mass shooting at the Danforth. 2 people were killed, a 10 and an 18-year-old. Another 13 people, ages 17 to 59, were wounded, with minor to life-threatening injuries. Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the no notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. We will refer to today's shooter as David. Sunday, July 22nd, 2018, 29-year-old David was scheduled to work at 11 o'clock a.m. He clocked in at 12:08 p.m., worked a few hours, and left at 3:05 p.m. It's unclear how David spent the rest of his afternoon. His parents knew David would be in there all night, but that wasn't unusual. David was always in his room and rarely interacted with his parents. That evening, his twin brother had a conversation about David's life, and that it was time to settle down and get his life together. This upset David, and at approximately 9 p.m., he loaded up a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson M&P semi-automatic pistol and dressed in all black, from head to toe, slung a black shoulder-type bag over his shoulder, and donned a black hat. David also wore a black beard at the time of the incident. He left his house, walking towards Danforth Avenue near Logan Avenue. Surveillance would later show him leaving home at 9:10 p.m. In an eerie twist, David's brother texted him around 10 o'clock p.m. that night, telling him to stay home because there was a shooting. The brother's worry was understandable. He was David's twin after all. He may have instinctively known his brother was never coming home, though he likely was in utter shock when he learned why. David kept walking until he reached the area of Alexander the Great Parkette, which is a park with a fountain. Once David got to the park, he pulled out the firearm and began shooting at random, near the fountain. Unfortunately, just like so many of the other shootings we have covered, many people nearby immediately thought that the noise was fireworks in the close vicinity.
First, because it was a rapid fire, and then there'd be a pause and some more fire. We didn't know what it was. We saw people starting to run in our direction, and I still didn't know what it was, and then more people were running, and so we started running, and we ran down a side street.
David continued walking, heading west on Danforth Avenue and shooting at random. He shot at people on the street and inside restaurants. Because it was such a balmy evening, people were sitting outside on restaurant patios. At 9:56 p.m., surveillance shows David entering the north side of Alexander the Great Parkette. Raising his weapon, David aimed and shot, striking 7 different people in the direction of the park.
Well, we were actually in our home. We're just the second door up, and we heard the shots, and it was very clear that they were bullet shots, and we thought that it was actually in our backyard because in July all our windows were open, so we ran through the house and shut our windows and lights and blinds, and then I went up to my bedroom bay window to look out, and I could just see a lot of chaos, people running frantically. My husband and I then came out the front door and took a few steps onto this area. We saw 5 people strewn around this fountain on the ground, shot. We saw 2 gentlemen in that area. We saw 2 young women over to my right.
6 people were shot inside the actual park, including the fatal shot to 18-year-old Reese Fallon, who was first shot in the arm. Reese could be seen holding her arm when David turned around and shot her several more times in the back. Paramedics and even onlookers tried to save her, but it was too late. Reese died at the scene. The 7th individual was shot at Mazes, which is a restaurant located directly next to the park.
Reese was laying here, and my neighbors were already with her. My neighbor Linda was cradling her head and shoulders and was speaking beautifully without stop, just giving her lots of words of love and encouragement. Clay took his shirt off and was pressing on her wounds. Other neighbors were trying to do chest compressions, and she was fighting for her life, and she passed in this very spot.
Dispatch received the first 911 call at 10 p.m. David then began heading west, still shooting his gun as he walked. As he casually strolled along Danforth Avenue firing rounds, David made the random decision to stop in front of Papa's Grill, where he fired multiple rounds into the restaurant. Right after that, he walked 1 block to Dimitris Cafe and fired multiple rounds, killing 10-year-old Juliana Kozis. Juliana was at the cafe with her family getting ice cream. The young girl was nearly finished with her cold treat when she was fatally shot. Juliana was taken to the hospital in critical condition, but sadly died the next day due to her injuries. At 10:06 p.m., David was spotted by police on the west sidewalk on Bowden Street. Witnesses reported that he was walking, at times running, in a calm-like manner, but then he would scream whenever he pulled the trigger. Whether it was planned or not, the shooting was so random, and the businesses he chose didn't appear to have any real significance to David. As he continued walking, he fired toward 7 Numbers restaurant. Patrons eating inside heard shots fired, and they moved to the back of the buildings for safety straight away.
Was it from that car?
A mother and her adult son were on the Danforth on that tragic day. They were shot at and started banging on a tattoo business called Skin Deep Tattoo. Tanya Wilson was locking up the shop for the night when she heard shots and decided to rush back inside to safety. She suddenly heard banging on the door and feared it was connected to the shooter, so she ignored it. However, after sneaking a look outside, she saw blood and made a snap decision to let the pair inside. Tanya sat both mother and son in separate tattoo chairs and started administering first aid until help arrived.
You know, people, it was crazy. People were running. There was, I think, just the face of one woman particularly that I think hit home for me because she was running and crying as if she was, and I think maybe she was one of a family of the people affected in the shoot. Questions were being rotated as to why this happened. I heard people saying that the shooter was a person, a thin man who frequented the area. So people are scared. People are scared.
As police arrived, 2 officers exited the same patrol vehicle. At the same moment, David spotted the police and started to fire at them. It was a close call. In fact, one shot completely shattered the back window of the patrol vehicle. After taking cover, the officers began to exchange gunfire with David. After what must have felt like an eternity, David finally gave up, turning and bolting from the scene on foot. He ran down Bowden Street, then cut over to head west on Danforth Avenue. Police didn't immediately know if they struck and/or injured David and continued their pursuit. It didn't take long or much effort when police encountered David. He was on Bowden Street, in front of Danforth Church. David was dead, lying on his back with a gunshot wound to the head. A post-mortem exam was performed on David. The cause of death was determined to be a perforating gunshot wound to the head and brain, consistent with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There were no other injuries on his body, meaning that the officers who exchanged gunfire with David never actually hit him. The gun was found still clutched between his pinky and ring fingers, and 2 loaded magazines were located nearby. A toxicology report was later done and determined no alcohol or drugs were found in his blood. A cell phone was seized from the body, and later, after officers confirmed David was dead, his cell phone started ringing. The officers answered the phone, getting David's worried folks on the line. Officers had the difficult task of explaining to this couple the severe, irreversible damage their son caused. The day after the shooting on July 23, 2018, a search warrant was executed at the apartment David shared with his parents. An empty gun box was found along with AK-47 magazines loaded with bullets. There were hundreds of loose rounds as well as boxed ammunition. Police located a Glock, a Ruger, and Winchester magazines, plus a soft rifle case and a trigger guard. There were multiple packages of what appeared to be a drug-like substance found in the residence, as well as a set of DVDs with titles relating to the conspiracy theories regarding the September 11th attacks. Drug substances were found in David's